We welcome you to another Sunday School lesson. Sunday School is a blessing and gift from God. If you show favoritism, you commit sin, James 2:9. It is sin because it is contrary to the character and command of God. Because favoritism is sin, there is no place for it in the hearts of God's people, and certainly no place for it in the church. Favoritism only breeds conflict. In Jacob's large family, sibling conflict was almost assured. The sons anxiously watched their mothers compete for Jacob's affection. The children grew with bitterness in their hearts. Jacob himself grew up in a home where parental partiality was evident. He knew firsthand the great harm this caused children, yet he repeated the error in his own home. In this lesson, we see an example of the kind of fruit that a family produces when it does not follow God's model for the home. The first part of our lesson begins with Genesis 35:22, which says, "While Israel was living in that region, Reuben went in and slept with his father's concubine Bilhah, and Israel heard of it." Jacob had 12 sons. Jacob, now called Israel, and his family were living in the area around Bethlehem. Reuben, Jacob's eldest son, born to Leah, the wife Jacob failed to love, had sexual relations with the servant of Rachel, Bilhah, who was a servant wife of his own father. This may have been an act of revenge, degrading the servant of Jacob's most loved wife Rachel, or Reuben was trying to exert authority over his father. Jacob heard about it, and will not forget, for on his deathbed he will remove from Reuben the birthright as the oldest son for this bold sin. Jacob had 12 sons by his 2 wives and 2 concubines. Verse 23 says, "The sons of Leah, Reuben the firstborn of Jacob, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun." The sons of Jacob's unloved wife, Leah, include Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun. Dinah is also a child of Leah, who was abused by a local prince. Reuben lost his privileges as the firstborn for sleeping with Bilhah, his father's concubine. Although Judah made some unrighteous choices, he would take on the leadership role among his brothers. He would also receive special blessings from his father. Simeon and Levi took revenge against Shechem for raping their sister Dinah. Issachar was conceived after Rachel made a trade with Leah, giving her a night of sex with Jacob in exchange for some mandrakes. Like Issachar, very little is said about Zebulun, but members of the tribe of Issachar were often called upon as fighters for Israel, after the people entered Canaan. Verse 24 says, "The sons of Rachel, Joseph and Benjamin." The sons of Jacob's most loved and recently deceased wife Rachel are Joseph and Benjamin. Joseph will become Jacob's most loved son, and the succinct sections of Genesis will focus mostly on his story of being sold to slavery, eventually rise to become a leader in Egypt, and save the entire known world and his family from famine. Benjamin is now the baby of the family, and Jacob's last link to Rachel. Saul, Israel's first king, came from the tribe of Benjamin. Other than Dinah, any daughters born by Jacob's wives are not mentioned. Verse 25 says, "The sons of Rachel's servant Bilhah, Dan and Naphtali." When Rachel discovered that she could not have children, she gave Bilhah her servant to her husband Jacob as a surrogate so that she could bear him children. Rachel named Bilhah's first son Dan, which means judging. She gave him this name because she said, "God has judged me, and has also heard my voice, and has given me a son." Bilhah's second son by Jacob was named Naphtali. Very little is said about Naphtali, but the tribe that descended from him were brave warriors. Verse 26 says, "The sons of Leah's servant Zilpah, Gad and Asher." As Rachel did with her servant, Leah brought Zilpah into the marriage as a servant wife to bear sons on her behalf. Zilpah bore Gad, which literally means a troop, and Asher, which means happy. Aside from Benjamin, recently born to Rachel in Bethlehem when Jacob arrived in the promised land of Canaan, Jacob's other 11 sons were all born when he lived and worked with his uncle and father-in-law, Laban, in Paddan Aram. Chapter 36 gives a record of the descendants of Esau, Jacob's brother. Chapter 37 records the experience of Joseph from the time he had dreams of his brothers bowing to him to the time he was sold by his brothers to traveling merchants who took him into Egypt. The second part of our lesson moves to chapter 38, where Jacob's son Judah marries a Canaanite woman and has 3 sons. His first son marries a woman called Tamar but is put to death by God for an unnamed sin. Judah follows tradition and marries Er's widow to the next oldest brother. Onan took Tamar for sex. God puts him to death as well. When Judah abandons his promise to give her to his next son Shelah, Tamar disguises herself as a prostitute. Judah, believing she was a prostitute, promised to send her young goats as payment for sex. But before they had intercourse, Tamar requested that he give her a pledge to confirm that he would pay her. Judah agreed and gave her his signet, his bracelet, and his staff as a pledge to pay her. Our printed text continues in verse 24, which says, "About 3 months later Judah was told, 'Your daughter-in-law Tamar is guilty of prostitution, and as a result she is now pregnant.' Judah said, 'Bring her out and have her burned to death.' This news comes to Judah, who is angry. Tamar is still promised to be married to Judah's son Shelah, so she would be considered guilty of a serious sin no matter how she became pregnant. The conclusion is that she's committed an act of sexual immorality. Customs of the time would call for the death penalty in cases of adultery. Judah's response is swift and final: burn her to death. Verse 25 says, "As she was being brought out, she sent a message to her father-in-law. 'I am pregnant by the man who owns these,' she said. And she added, 'See if you recognize whose seal and cord and staff these are.'" Tamar appears to be caught in the sin of sexual immorality. She is an unmarried woman, twice widowed but childless, promised to Judah's youngest son, yet she is pregnant. In such cases, local customs allowed for the death penalty. At this point, Tamar completes the trap she laid for Judah from the beginning. Judah has learned of her pregnancy and is demanding her death. She sends a message to him saying the father of her baby is the owner of a certain signet engraved with a seal, bracelets, and staff, with inscription that identified the owner. Verse 26 says, "Judah recognized them and said, 'She is more righteous than I, since I wouldn't give her to my son Shelah.' And he did not sleep with her again." Judah realizes that he has been caught in a trap, laid for him by Tamar. More than that, he realizes he is not merely guilty, but even more guilty than she is. He admits his guilt in not following through on his commitment to marry his third son to Tamar. It's important to note that Judah does not say Tamar is guiltless. Tamar's actions aren't justified, in any sense, but Judah fully realizes his role in creating the situation. Judah says that whatever Tamar has done, his own sin is worse. He too is guilty of sexual immorality, as well as lying and abandoning a widow. And Judah did not have intimate relations with Tamar, his daughter-in-law, again. A good lesson here is that those who truly repent of their sins will also forsake them. Judah was already guilty of fornication, so to have sexual intercourse with his daughter-in-law again would make him guilty of incest as well. The third part of our lesson comes from chapter 49. Chapters 39 to 48 cover Joseph's experiences in Egypt, with his brothers, his father, and bringing them all to Egypt to be with him. In Genesis 49 1-9, Jacob begins to give prophecies concerning his 12 sons. As part of his prophecy concerning his son Judah, verse 10 says, "The scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until he to whom it belongs shall come, and the obedience of the nations shall be his." Jacob foresaw first that the scepter or royal rule will come from the tribe of Judah, which was fulfilled in David's family. Second, he foresaw that the tribe of Judah would be the royal tribe, and the tribe from which the Messiah would come. The third thing Jacob foresaw was that royal rule will not depart from Judah, but it will continue in that tribe until the coming of the Messiah. From the time of David until the Babylonian captivity, the scepter was in Judah. The fourth thing Jacob foresaw is that neither will a lawgiver or royal authority cease to come from Judah's descendants. The fifth thing that Jacob foresaw was when this descendant from Judah comes, he will gather people from all nations under his rule. Verse 11 says, "He will tether his donkey to a vine, his colt to the choicest branch, he will wash his garments in wine, his robes in the blood of grapes." Jacob's mention of Judah's descendant riding a donkey fits Zechariah's prophecy that the king of Zion will come humble and mounted on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey. Jesus fulfilled this prophecy in what Christians refer to as the triumphal entry prior to his crucifixion. Normally, nobody would tie a donkey to a choice grapevine, the donkey would eat the valuable wine grapes. What Jacob describes is a time when grapes are so abundant that nobody worries about running out. They even wash their clothes in wine, an exaggeration meant to imply that fine wine will be as plentiful as water. This points to the enormous blessings under the rule of the Messiah in a distant era. Our final verse says, "His eyes will be darker than wine, his teeth whiter than milk." Jacob has pointed to a time, under the reign of a powerful king, when there will be unimaginable prosperity. Continuing the poetic language, Jacob compares the eyes of Judah's future descendants to wine. This may be a reference to attractiveness. Some believe this is better translated as dark with wine, another reference to how wine is easily available in their land. Their teeth may be whiter than milk from drinking abundant amounts of milk, or this may be another suggestion that Judah's descendants will be attractive, prosperous people. The scepter given to Judah. The prophecy given by Jacob would have a double fulfillment. It would be partially fulfilled through David, who was a descendant of Judah. David's rule as king was a forerunner to the rule of the Messiah, which was the second and ultimate fulfillment of Jacob's prophecy. Of course, as this lesson teaches, Judah's family was not what one would consider to be the best ancestors of a royal monarchy. Today, we would refer to Judah's family as dysfunctional at best. But this lesson also teaches that God can redeem and transform anyone and any family to fulfill his plans, even using them to be the ancestors of his Messiah and future King, Jesus Christ. The scepter given to Judah. 1. God can choose any person or family to accomplish his plans, Genesis 35:22-26. People and families are where we can feel love and learn how to love others. Life is tough, and we need people we can lean on. 2. It is best to know the facts before we make rash judgments, Genesis 38:24. Let's not be impulsive or act on instinct, without thinking decisions through. Look for the truth first. 3. No matter what you do to hide your sins, they will eventually be discovered and revealed, Genesis 38:25-26. Nothing in all creation is hidden from God's sight. Everything is uncovered and laid bare before the eyes of him to whom we must give account, Hebrews 4:13. 4. Although Judah did some sinful things, God, in his grace, still chose his family to start the royal reign in Israel, Genesis 49:10. God always has his way with Judah, as he will with us. 5. When Messiah comes to set up his kingdom, there will be some major changes to mankind for the better, Genesis 49, 11-12. Jesus, who fulfilled those ancient promises, will also surprise many people in his kingdom of peace and plenty. We are truly glad you spent time to learn this lesson with us. We hope you are blessed and may share these with somebody else. Thank you very much, have a great week, and God bless you always, dear brothers and sisters.